Hello, everyone. Welcome to Brain Hack number 2. I am so excited to be here. Today's Brain Hack is water is a source of comfort for a lot of people. You can self-soothe with a bath or shower or listening to water through an app. Water sounds like ocean, a river, and rain have commonly been used to bring calm. I want to talk about this use of water and really tie it to sensory stimuli. So it's interesting. We use this word trigger a lot, where I'm triggered. And the truth is, all triggers, everything that we experience is the result of a trigger. So we tend to think that we only get negatively triggered. So when we say triggered, we're talking about having engaged the amygdala and entering a fight or flight response. And so when we're in that trigger, we tend to think that the only types of triggers we have are negative triggers. And I'm going to share a little bit of something that's sensory. I'm going to get into it later on that up-levels that. But what I want to talk about first is this concept of trigger is not just negative. So everything we experience in life is a result of a trigger. This is what I'm trying to teach people in phase 1, is that our entire life experience is a trigger. And so what I want to do is give some examples of that, and I want to give examples of both positive and negative triggers. And I will get into this deeper when I bring in the trigger class from Introduction to Brain Chemistry. But when we're looking at this concept of being triggered, we tend to think of trauma or negative things that happen. But what I want to do is run through a handful of triggers that can be positive that can be positive for people most of the time. For some people, they might be negative. And then I want to talk about water specifically, because most of us assume that we all have the same response to the same triggers, and we don't. And so that I want to utilize that resource to help kind of drive this point home. So to begin with, we have triggers all day long, and so I want to talk about those. So I want to talk about kind of a normal day. So all of us have a certain response to weather. Weather is a very powerful trigger. There are people who have seasonal depression, and of course that depression would be caused by the sensory trigger of low light or snow or temperature shifts. It could be any number of things that somehow connect to possibly a time in our life, or even genetically to our family line and areas they've lived in that might create those triggers. A sunny day might make us happier. Going for a walk lately, it's warmed up pretty quick. It was I think above 80 today, and it's been kind of amazing for me. I've spent a lot more time this year outside than I did last year. I wanted to last year, but this year something about being in social distancing, I just want to be outside more. And so I'm still doing my work, but I do it on my deck or out in the yard somewhere a lot of times. And being outside has kind of a two-part trigger for me. So I love it when I step outside and it's a beautiful morning and the sun is shining and birds are chirping and I'm seeing all these flowers bloom in my yard. But also, because of the amount of light against my computer screen and because of the distraction of my dog or people walking by and saying hi or all those things, I feel very distracted. And so after a couple hours of it, I start to feel that negative trigger of not getting anything accomplished. And so it now just feels like a distraction. And so I generally will bring myself back inside. And this is what I'm talking about, that it's going to be different for different people. There are people that hate summer and love winter, and they're vice versa. I'm very much a summer person. I love summer, and I don't like to be cold. I don't hate winter, but I don't like to be cold. Now, I want to talk about one that I use a lot when we're in classes, and that is something like brownies. right? We can walk into a place and smell warm brownies cooking, and for some of us, that's a really positive sensory trigger. We get happy, or we may smell lavender and it may be soothing, or we may smell fresh cut grass and it may be exciting, or if it's a person with allergies, it may be triggering. So all of us have both positive and negative sensory triggers. So there are sensory triggers that put us in a really good mood and we feel happy, a lot of connection, human connection, being validated by others. There's this condition that is prevalent in our society now, which is getting enough likes, having enough people engage and like what you say on social media. So going viral and just having something be liked by a large percentage of society is a very positive sensory trigger to us. And there are other things. There are a lot of new experiences we're having right now that are positive for some and negative for others, right? So we have all these triggers, and we really need to connect those to sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. And the reason why is because it is that in combination with memory that causes us to trigger. Now, there are triggers that are at a deeper level than we realize, but those aren't just the interoceptive triggers I'm going to talk about. Those include sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. So the strongest sensory perception in the human body is smell. It's actually scent, and that's a direct link. Our nose picks up everything, and they did studies, and actually they use dogs sometimes to smell cancer. In fact, I heard they're training dogs to smell COVID. And right now, because your scent, your sweat changes when you're sick, the smell of it, and we don't recognize it. It's not enough of a scent change that our conscious mind recognizes, oh, you smell like you have a virus, but our subconscious mind does. And they've actually, when they were training dogs, decided to test humans, and actually humans are better at smelling cancer in other humans than dogs are, because this sense is so strong. Now, we aren't consciously aware of that. There could be the most subtle smell, and along with that, I always talk about that, you're right, the sensory information coming in combines with a memory of some kind. And think of memory as data, not as a video of your life. So this data is stored in your brain, and there are sensory connections to it. And your brain is just doing this to try and keep you safe. And so what it does is it gathers the sensory data, and then it combines that. So when we hit the sensory data again, it links it to that memory and says, oh, this means this. Warm brownies mean I might have something I like the taste of soon. Sunshine means that I can be outside and I can enjoy nature and everything is going to be lush and green again. Are other situations like, for example, let's use another one, touch. Getting a hug from somebody means I'm wanted or I'm connected or any other number of circumstances. So these become really important to our brain. Our brain really connects to this sensory information that's coming in and ties it to previous experience. And so this is a lot what therapeutic process is doing, right? Whether it's hypnosis or NLP or psychotherapy or any of these things, what they're doing is addressing the memory. Let's adjust the memory. For me, and the way I approach it, that is going to take a really long time to alter our experience of life. And this is why people don't generally experience radical change, because they are addressing one memory at a time. And each one of those neurons has billions of connections. This is why we call it peeling an onion. This is why you might address an issue and then find another layer of it, another layer. All you're finding is here's this neuron, and it has this web of connections that it's interlinked with that are based on survival. And so every one of those connections would have to be addressed right in that. Now, positive sensory triggers are great. This is a great approach for coping mechanisms. If you have anxiety, use a scented candle you like the smell of, or keep something you like to drink nearby. Keep something close at hand that is soothing or comforting. Or if you like to be outside and you're beginning to feel stressed, go outside and it will adjust, right? The issue is that if we keep it here, of course, we're then subject to that being available. What if I'm stressed and I can't go outside because I work in a building and it's not time for my break, or something like that? And so we do want to move beyond that. But understanding that our life is the result of sensory experience becomes very critical for managing the good homeostasis in the system. And so this is what I wanted to start with. This is where I wanted to dig in first, is I wanted to talk about the sensory. Think of all 5 senses and think what brings you pleasure, the feeling of pleasure. Remember that dopamine experience of pleasure is a byproduct of a chemical. It's not that we try and make ourselves do something and then we have the feeling. No, we cause the sensory trigger and then we have the feeling. So think of things that make you feel better and use those as you get stressed. Tonight I want to go a little deeper, and this is the reason I wanted to use this water brain hack, the one about water. And that is when we look at interoceptive experience, this becomes something deeper than just the 5 senses. Now you can look at water, and water can be soothing. Water can be amazingly soothing for people. I love the sound of water. I love the sound of rain. I was born and raised in Utah. We're a desert. We don't get a lot of water here. And so a good rainstorm was a rare enough experience that I fell in love with them. And so I love a good thunderstorm, and I love the sound of rain on a tent. I grew up camping, and the sound of rain on a tent is probably one of the most beautiful sounds to me. I just love it. And so water can be powerful. A warm bath or a cool shower on a hot day can be really brilliant. However, say you're someone that had a negative experience with water. Say you almost drowned. Water can also be that negative experience to those people. So part of what we need to know is, first of all, that it can't be positive or negative. And so that's why I've addressed that this week. And the other part we need to know is the interoceptive part of our nature. And this is what I want to talk about. And ironically, today, I have been given an opportunity to dig into this on a deep level, and I'm really glad I had this chance to do this, because I have been extremely careful with social distancing. I do shopping for my parents, and they're both my mom's almost 80, my dad is over 80, and they live in a senior community with people who are all over the high-risk age. And so in that, I have been extremely careful. But today, a few weeks ago, I faltered in the fact that I found out my granddaughter lives next door, and she's been visiting her family who isn't social distancing. And I thought at that time I should probably not have her come over and do her homework here. And she struggles getting it done if she's not here. So it was a big dilemma to me on what to do. Should I not have her here and possibly have her failing school, or should I assume things will be okay? And I decided on the latter, that I would just be careful and I'd be aware and I'd wash my hands and use sanitizer and all this. Well, a few days ago, she started exhibiting symptoms of being sick, And I started to get concerned yesterday or the day before because her cough was very much in her lungs. It was very hacking cough, very from the lungs. It had that sound to it. And I thought, oh, that's not good. And then I started to feel just slightly off last night, and I woke up this morning, and I woke up with a cough, and my throat, it has a tickle in it, and it's difficult to breathe. And this is why I want to talk about this and the irony of this water concept, because the thing I heard about COVID is that it feels like you're drowning, and I relate to that. What I feel like is I've been running sprints all day, and I just can't catch my breath. And I thought, wow, I've been so careful, but I might have COVID-19. And it was all of a sudden, this thing I felt like couldn't possibly happen to me. I am so careful, and I'm not in contact with anyone else. And I thought, I knew my granddaughter was at risk. She wasn't social distancing. And I think I didn't appreciate social distancing as much as I should. I do appreciate the fact that I know social distancing has prevented the spread of this. We look at the current death toll, and for that to be the first case here was on January 22nd, and to already have so many people die by this time is startling. And I take that very seriously. I've especially since my granddaughter's been here, I've worn a mask and stuff just to be cautious. And I go to the grocery store, and I'm very careful about not catching it so I won't spread it. And I wear the mask and gloves to do the same, to be respectful of that. But the ironic thing is that I don't think I ever really believed, wow, that could be me. So I don't want to dwell on that too long, because that's not what this is about. But when I woke up this morning, and my breathing was labored, and I was coughing, and I am extremely fatigued. My muscles are tight. Finally, I had decided I didn't have a fever this morning, so I thought, well, if I don't get I'll wait till I get a fever. If I get a fever, I'll go get tested, because I also know that getting tested has its risk for both the healthcare workers and everything. And I thought, I'll just quarantine for 2 weeks. And then I asked my granddaughter to come over, and I took her temperature, and she had a fever. And all of a sudden, and then I took mine again, and it was a degree higher than it was this morning. And I thought, I'm not going to mess around. I am going to go, and I'm going to get tested, not for my health, because I'm worried about others. But what's occurred that I want to talk about today is about interoceptive relationship with our body. When I was a highly triggered person, I didn't have a strong connection with my body. So when I started doing this work 4 years ago, I ate a lot of junk food. I could pretty much eat anything I wanted. I had a high metabolism because I had a tachycardia. And of course, because I had PTSD, of course I had a tachycardia. And so I had all these conditions that kept my metabolism high because the adrenaline was always flowing. And an interesting thing occurred for me as I started to implement these practices. So I've been doing this now for over 4 years, and initially it was the cure of PTSD and stuff, but what's been interesting is this observation of food. So like I said, I used to eat a lot of junk food, and I can't now. When I eat junk food, I get horrible cramping in my body, and it's really interesting because I assumed that the healthier I got, the more tolerant my body would be. But what I realized is that it's not intolerant that my body can't handle it, but my body was probably always feeling that pain. So digestion is painful always. Stomach acid moving through the system is excruciating for the body. But your brain turns off those pain receptors so that you can function. The brain is genius. It's thinking of everything. And so it turns off the digestive receptors. Now, when you live in heightened states of fight or flight, like PTSD, it turns off more. There was body pain I had. I had all sorts of issues that I couldn't feel. And because my interoceptive relationship with my body was lessened. So we have this brilliant part of our brain called the insula. And the insula is always measuring the homeostatic state of the body. And so you have this, what they call a second brain in your belly, which is, of course, fight or flight, and rest and digest. The digestive system is a critical part of that. And one of the most interesting things about this is that my body is I'm more sensitive to the feelings of my body. And so when I get viruses, I don't get the symptoms. I don't get the cough or the runny nose or the congestion or any of those things anymore. I haven't had those for probably a couple years. I think the last one I had, I was sick for maybe a day, and I had very, very reduced symptoms from everyone around me. Way less. And so I'll be aware of a virus, but I won't ever get fully sick. And I felt relatively this morning, I felt bad. I can tell I can't take a deep breath. When I take too deep a breath, my chest hurts. My body is fatigued. My muscles feel exhausted. I literally drove to go get tested, and just driving there and back was so exhausting. I thought, I'm not going to be able to do my hack tonight because it was just so fatigued. Now, I feel awake. I feel fine. I don't feel like my life's in danger, but I am hyper aware of it. And because of that, I'm a lot more sensitive right now to triggers. My tolerance to it feels really hot in my house right now, and my tolerance isn't as high to that as it usually would be. And it's about being aware of this, being aware that we do so much to try and escape the messages of our body. Pain and sickness are not lessons. They're also not a thing we're meant to disguise. They're a message system from the body. Fever, for example. Having a fever is the body is increasing the body temperature to kill viruses, because the body, as it increases the temperature, heat kills a lot of viruses. So when you get a fever, your body is actually creating that fever on purpose. This idea of it baking your brain is inaccurate. We don't get brain damage from high temperatures. But when we're fighting these viruses, like, for example, this one, this lessened oxygen level in the system does cause the brain to not think well. There are a lot of symptoms of this that are different, like not being able to wake up, or not being able to stand up when you've been sitting, like just not having muscle strength. And that's all driven by oxygen levels. And so in this, what we really need to do is to realize that having a conscious relationship with the interoceptive parts of our body becomes even more important at a sensory level. So how this benefits us when we're using it for our brain, what our brain health is, realizing that it's a two-way street. And this is what I really want to address tonight, that I think I don't address enough. I should. But the thing I want to talk about is how we can use our interoceptive body as a response that can actually be up to a phase 2 level practice. And so I want to connect water to this, but before I do water, I want to talk about basic triggers. So when we talk about negative triggers or fight or flight triggers, what happens with the body is it increases the heart rate, it shortens the breath, it rushes sugar into the system. There are a lot of things that happen, and some of these we can use to send a message back to the brain that there's no longer a reason to be triggered. Breath work is one of these. So the breath is shortened due to the trigger, But if we elongate our breath and slow our breath, we can tell the brain, oh, there's no reason to be triggered anymore. So I want to give you a handful of things you can use to do this, that are these results. And then I want to talk about a little bit about water as a practice and a great opportunity it presents. And so the first one is, so if you're triggered, if you're feeling stress, you hear about deep breaths. Now, I recommend not using hatha or fire breath or something like that to manage triggers, because they do increase adrenaline production. And so if you're suffering something like depression from your triggers, then that's fine. But if you're not, if you're a person that has anxiety at all, which oftentimes, even though a person suffers depression, they still have anxiety, we are reinforcing an imbalanced adrenal system if we do something that the body responds to, like cardio. What we want to do is we want to tell the brain, rest and digest. I'm in a rest state. So number one thing we can do that sends an interoceptive message to the brain that we don't need to be triggered is deep breathing. So just really slow, deep breaths, right? We can do the same by including relaxation with that, or there's great mindfulness if you want to do phase 2 of feeling the temperature of the air as you breathe it in, and again as you exhale. And it's really interesting because usually the air warms as it comes into your body. But if you're in something like a sauna or out in high heat, the air is actually cooler as it comes into your body, and as it's cooler as it goes out of your body. And so it's interesting to observe that. You can observe that at the back of your nose, or some people do it on their lip, where they're paying attention to the temperature difference of the air when it comes in versus when it goes out of your body. So that's one. Another one I want to talk about is the most obvious: rest and digest. Activate the digestive system. Now, this is where a lot of food addiction comes in. But one of the things you can do is a cup of salt water. Salt activates releases serotonin into the body. This is why it's dehydrating, because it triggers digestive functions in the body, so it causes us to release water. However, if we're drinking it just to calm the system, it's a really good resource for just a panic attack or too stressed. That's why we crave salty food. And so the important thing, I think, is to make sure we go with healthy options. So a little bit, I do Himalayan pink salt in water, like when I'm water fasting. It's amazing, and it's far higher benefits than other water. I feel the difference because of the minerals in it. In addition, we can do other things, stretching the muscles. The muscles tighten and get full of sugar to make us be able to be stronger, run faster. So stretching is a really good one, because then you're sending the message that the body's relaxed. I talked about lying on the floor. Now, this is one of the biggest interoceptive responses, right? Because this is what the body does organically to get you out of extreme duress. So when you pass out, the brain is inherently automatically putting you on the floor, and being in that position tells the brain, oh, a tiger obviously isn't chasing me because I'm lying on the floor. So I did talk about that last week, but understand that's interoceptive. The body is measuring that you're horizontal, that you're lying down, that you're not standing up. Doesn't matter the position. It does matter that it's not bed, because the brain processes that differently. So lying on the bed or couch is not as good as the floor. It does work. The brain does say, this is my rest state. I just understand that beds and couches can be triggers for some people because of personal habits. If you have insomnia or anything like that, bed can be a different message. But we so seldom lay on the floor when we become adults that it tends to stay a consistent message in the brain for most people. Again, not everybody. Another thing is being able to affect the body's system by temperature. cooling or warming the blood can be good. And this is kind of the water point, but you can do this just by putting like an ice pack or a heat pack on your wrist, but changing the body temperature tells the brain that something has shifted, something's happened that way. I want to use water in a different way, but you can do showers and stuff for that, but they're just more complicated than just changing the blood temperature. So I want to talk about water and using it as a contemplative practice. So this is where we would be we're practicing our interoceptive abilities. So how aware are you of your body? So you can do this by playing with different temperatures of water. Don't do any temperature that's uncomfortable, that's going to cause you harm, because that's going to create trigger. But one of the things I love is, what does lukewarm water feel like to you? So I love the feeling of lukewarm water, because I can only feel the difference in density around, like if I put my fingers in around where the surface of the water is, I can feel the break point and nothing else. So it becomes an interesting sensory experience. If it rains, go out and just put out your hand and feel the rain dripping. Become consciously aware of that experience. Become aware of how it feels to touch like a wet rag, or what, just because water has the capability to be so flexible, right? It can be warm, it can be cool, it can be something we fully immerse ourselves in or feel at a small level. But taking this time to become interactive with the interoceptive experiences of our body becomes really powerful. And there are a lot of other options besides water to do this. You can use sand. Sand is very soothing for a lot of people. That's why I think that's part of the reason we love beaches. I think for some people it's more the sand than it is the ocean. I know my daughter was obsessed with sand living in Utah. Of course, when you go on the hiking trails, there's a lot of sand on the trail, or we'd go to places like Jericho or to Goblin Valley or things like that where there was sand. And I think it's something like Goblin Valley, the feel of that sand on my skin is just such a sensory experience, right? But it's that feeling, that touch experience that we don't address a lot, honestly. We talk about sound and we talk about taste and smell and sight, but really getting into how the body responds. And so not just being aware of, okay, if I decide to put my feet in water, not just being aware of how does the water feel on my feet, but how does my body change in response to that? If I put a cold rag on my wrist and feel the coolness, or an ice pack and feel the coolness, or of my blood, of cool blood moving through me, or a heating pad, and how does my blood feel when it's warm? I don't want you to just be aware of the feeling of it. I want you to connect to, what does it do to my mood? How does it make me feel? Do I relax? Do I tense up? Be aware of the way it affects everything else, because that's what we want to become aware of, is that interoceptive system is telling us safe, not safe, safe, not safe. That's all it's doing, is it's toggling back and forth between those two dynamics. And a lot of us spend the majority of our time in not safe. And so we really do want to address this. We really do want to become more aware of that, more aware of how we respond. And like I said, water is a really, really great way to do this. Water is so readily available for it. It's a great thing to use. And get to know water practices for you that work at every level. So what kind of water soothes me, right? It might be rain, a thunderstorm or something for me. That soothes me. When I'm doing a practice like I'm talking about, the interoceptive, that's going to be a phase 2 practice. It's going to be a concentration practice, but I can also take it into a meditation. water can be a great meditative state. So play with it at different levels and ask yourself, what of all the things I can do with water represents what kind of practice to me? Because the more aware we can become introspectively, the better it is. So for me, looking at this potential of possibly having COVID, the thing I am most grateful for is the fact that I am so aware that something's not right with me today. I'm aware that I'm short of breath. I'm aware that my muscles are fatigued. I'm aware of the feeling in my chest when I take a deep breath. Because I'm very conscious of my body, I am very aware. I know how it normally feels in homeostasis. And because I've become aware of all of this, I was able to stop and think I should take my granddaughter's temperature. That cough she has means something. Maybe it means something to me. And I was able to call the COVID hotline, and I was able to ask them questions. I was able to say, okay, is this something I need to worry about? Maybe it's not. Maybe it has nothing to do with COVID. Maybe I'm off base. And by the time I was done talking, having authorization to go get tested. They only want people to go get tested that have symptoms. They're opening up their testing a bit, but you have to be authorized to be tested because they need the resources. So even for me, where I might have it, they say 2 to 5 days because the labs are full of tests, and they need to test people in the hospital that are on ventilators before they test me. And so they are trying to control the amount of testing to not flood the system. So I was able to there was a person there that I could talk to and have a conversation with and decide what was best. And that all came from my ability to be aware this morning and not just be like, oh, I feel off. I mean, you could probably tell by looking at me, I don't feel extremely horrible, but I am aware. I am aware that things aren't right now. And I am aware of the information I've gathered. I'm aware of what has come through so far. It's really moving to me to have this opportunity to do this work, to offer something that can help people feel better in this time. The last 20 seconds of the video will have a button to subscribe show up. You'll also see the Brain Hack playlist, as well as a link to the first class in Introduction to Brain Chemistry. So those videos will be popping up. Just remember to pause before the video ends or they will disappear. Of course, they'll come back if you just go back and click the end of the video. I think that's everything. Again, thank you for joining me. I really do hope everyone stays safe and well. And if you have questions later, add them. Just add them to comments and I will definitely respond. I love getting questions. I'll either respond to them in the comments or I will bring them up at the next Brain Hack and I will answer them. So if you have questions outside of the time we're together, don't hesitate asking them. I love to answer them, and your question is probably a question other people have as well. I look forward to seeing everyone next week. I hope you have a beautiful evening.